foremost, tell us a little bit about where you're from.
Yeah, for sure. So I was born in New York to a Lebanese father and an American mom. And since then, I have lived in 4 countries and 5 states. The countries are Lebanon, Denmark, Cyprus, and the United States, of course. And the 5 states I've lived in are New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, California, and now Tennessee. And I often tell people that I grew up around the world, but that I found my home in Tennessee. And what I mean by that is, so I love living here in Tennessee, but I have lived more consecutive years here than I have anywhere else. I'm approaching my 10-year anniversary of living in Tennessee this coming February, March. So I've only lived for like 7 years at a time max in all the other places that I've been. So I really consider myself to be a citizen of the world in a sense.
So
Cool.
Where about in Pennsylvania? Where did you live?
So I lived in Philly. Philly for 6 months, and I lived in New York City, obviously, for a big chunk of my childhood,
Right.
between Queens and Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And Virginia, I worked for a year at Virginia Tech, so I lived in Southwest Virginia. And Los Angeles, I did my undergrad and my grad school in LA. I went to the University of Southern California.
Yeah, as I recall, you had to flee Lebanon, right?
Yes. So after my parents divorced, I went with my dad to Lebanon, and I spent a piece of my childhood there. So yeah, this was during the mid to late 80s, and I think it was in 1989, the war started to get really bad, and me and my dad and my stepmother and my two sisters were staying in a shelter, and we were actively trying to flee the country at that point and return back to the United States. So I still remember that watching something on the TV. So what would happen is families would flee the country by boat overnight to nearby Cyprus, which was 15 miles off the coast. And I remember seeing a video of one of those boats filled with Lebanese people, and they had been hit by a Syrian fighter plane, and they had pulled the bodies out of the wreckage. And I remember seeing a kid that was about my age getting pulled out, and he was blue in the face. So I remember seeing that image, and then a few weeks later, again, I was only 8 years old, so my sense of time was distorted. We got on one of those boats, and I remember us all boarding that boat, and everyone on the boat was very, very quiet. And we sailed towards Cyprus, and then there was a point where everyone on the boat was very tense and quiet. We were just all holding our breath, just wanting to be outside of the zone where we could get hit by a missile or something. But we made it out of the country, and then everyone on the boat started to clap and celebrate. We made it to Cyprus, and just to give you some reference, this was a civil war in Lebanon between the different factions of the country. Muslim Christians, Christian, Muslim, just a total mess. So yeah, that experience of having lived in Lebanon and experienced war had a really profound impact on me and my leadership style, I would say. Yeah, so we moved back to New York, and I remember like my first day back in school. This was, I think, 3rd grade in New York. So this was in Queens, which is one of the most diverse parts of our country. And I had come from Lebanon, where everyone looked similar. And I remember going to my class where it was basically just kind of a rainbow of people. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow, there's so much diversity. There's so many, and it was really exciting. So that was one of my first impressions of like returning back to New York. And I mean, throughout my life, I've really sought out diversity of thought, diversity of people. I think diversity is a beautiful thing. So yeah, we lived in New York for about 6 years, and then my father and stepmother wanted to move back to Lebanon because their parents were aging, getting older. So we moved back there, and then I decided to move back to the States when I was college ready. So I moved back to California. So my dad's parents had their home, and my stepmother's parents had their homes. But people in Lebanon are very tightly knit. It's a very family-oriented and relationship-oriented community. So my grandparents were a really big part of my life, for sure.